Hello everybody, thank you for coming again to the lectures of Untold History. Today we're going to be dealing with New World Order. It's going to be the second part following first lecture we did last week, and today we're going to be dealing specifically with some groups, organizations that push or promote the idea of establishing a new world order or the need of having a new world order. And we're going to start by listening to a speech that John Fitzgerald Kennedy did while he was President of the United States of America. Please listen very carefully to what he says and the wording he uses.
Ladies and gentlemen, the very word secrecy is repugnant in a free and open society, and we are, as a people, inherently and historically opposed to secret societies, to secret oaths, and to secret proceedings. For we are opposed around the world by a monolithic and ruthless conspiracy that relies primarily on covert means for expanding its sphere of influence, on infiltration instead of invasion, on subversion instead of elections, on intimidation instead of free choice. It is a system which has conscripted vast human and material resources into the building of a tightly knit, highly efficient machine that combines military, diplomatic, intelligence, economic, scientific, and political operations. Its preparations are concealed, not published. Its mistakes are buried, not headlined. Its dissenters are silenced, not praised. No expenditure is questioned, no secret is revealed. That is why the Athenian lawmaker Solon decreed it a crime for any citizen to shrink from controversy. I am asking your help in the tremendous task of informing and alerting the American people, confident that with your help, man will be what he was born to be, free and independent.
Okay. So basically, did you notice he said we're against secret societies, secret proceedings, secret oaths. Also he mentioned that we're opposed around the world, so it's a global thing, to a monolithic conspiracy that engloves many aspects like politics, economics, scientists, and I put that religion. So very, very interesting what John Fitzgerald Kennedy said. Okay, let's carry on with a group called the Illuminati. Secret order founded in 1776 in Ingolstadt, Bavaria, Germany, by Adam Weishaupt, a Jesuit. Very interesting point, he was a Jesuit priest. The group was an extension of High Freemasonry. The order's name means the Enlightened Ones, signified that its members had been initiated into the secret teachings of Lucifer. That's what the name Lucifer means the light bearer, the one that brings light. Let's carry on. The Illuminati had been designed for one purpose, to create a new world order. Its founder, Adam Weishaupt, declared, "It's our duty to surround them with its Illuminati's members, so that the profane may have no access to them. Thus we are able most powerfully to promote its interests. We must do our utmost to procure the advancement of Illuminati into all important civil offices. By this plan we shall direct all mankind. In this manner, and by the simplest means, we shall set all in motion and in flames." Basically, things are going to start moving, changing, and there's going to be conflict. The occupations must be so allotted and contrived that we may, in secret, influence all political transactions. Now let's see what historian Nesta Webster has to say. Talking about a Masonic meeting, he says, What passed at this Congress, a Masonic Congress, in 1782, will never be known to the outside world. Those men were under oath to reveal nothing. One such honest Freemason, the Comte de Verrières, returning from the Congress of Wilhelmsbad, could not conceal his alarm, and when questioned, replied, "I will not confide it to you. I can only tell you that all this is very much more serious than you think. The conspiracy which is being woven is so well thought out that it will be impossible for the monarchy and the church to escape from it." Very interesting, very, very interesting quote. Now I'm going to show you an official document written by George Washington, which you can find in the US Congress Library. That's what he said. "I have heard much of the nefarious and dangerous plan and doctrines of the Illuminati. It was not my intention to doubt that the doctrine of the Illuminati and the principles of Jacobinism had not spread in the United States." Very interesting. He talks about the doctrine of the Illuminati and the principles of Jacobinism. I don't know if you remember, during the French Revolution, those pushing for a change, spreading the revolution, was the Jacobin Party. And the Jacobin Party, in their documents, they claimed that they followed the philosophy of Adam Weishaupt, and even called Adam Weishaupt, the founder of the Illuminati, a great patriot. And in their documents, the Jacobinists would sign their documents with the all-seeing eye on top of the pyramid. Very interesting history. And now let's see the official document. You can see at the top left on the second line where he mentions the Illuminati. And basically here George Washington was warning his people about the Illuminati interfering in the United States of America. Now, that's the logo for the League of Nations. League of Nations was founded just after the First World War. Notice the symbol also is a 5-pointed star, well, 2 5-pointed star inside a pentagon. We saw the pentagon last week. And the 5-pointed star has loads of meanings, but basically it's used in the New Age movement, in witchcraft, and also in Freemasonry. And each group applies a different meaning to this symbol. Some say, for instance, in the New Age, some say that each point of the star represents an element from planet Earth, like earth, fire, water. The top one, they say, represents spirit. In occultism, in Satanism, if you turn it upside down, they say represent Satan, or the goat of Mendes. In secret societies like Freemasonry, sometimes they say it might represent man freed from God's path, or from God's orders, let's say it this way. Basically, man freed from obeying God. And that's where it comes from. That's the true origins of the 5-pointed star. Comes from Babylon. They knew, that's very, very interesting. We're talking about few, maybe couple or more thousand years before Christ, BC. They knew that the sun, Venus, and the earth would form an alignment 5 times every 8 years. And that's where you get the 5-pointed star. So it's astrology mixed with sun worship, Venus worship, and we'll see that in occultism, sun worship, Venus worship is very, very prominent. Sun is the male side, Venus is the female side, they say of the same deity, but all stems to sun worship and astrology. Okay, let's start with the first group that promotes a New World Order. This is the logo for the Council on Foreign Relations. Any of you have heard of this organization before? Council on Foreign Relations. Not many people know about it, also known as the CFR. And they have an interesting logo. Let's see what it means. It's a Latin word found on many ancient Roman coins, meaning everywhere. That's the word you find underneath is ubique. It's the English form is ubique, the root word in English for ubiquitous, which means present or seeming to be present everywhere at the same time, omnipresent. That's the same terminology that we apply, or secret societies apply, to the all-seeing eye. So basically it's the same concept, but with another symbol. The idea of all-seeing, all present. Okay, first we read, on May 30th, 1919, several leading members of the delegations to the Paris Peace Conference met at the Hotel Majestic in Paris to discuss setting up an international group which would advise the respective governments on international affairs. He mentions many names involved with the creation of this conference, and interesting that right at the bottom says, Baron Edmond de Rothschild of France dominated the Paris Peace Conference, and each of the founders of the Royal Institute ended up being men who met Rothschild's approval. Very interesting. We find this name everywhere, Rothschild. Remember we spoke about them on the first lecture last week? They are the most prominent banking family in the entire world. They ruled the finance of Europe and America a couple of centuries ago, and they also have strong links with Freemasonry and with another organization that we'll see as we go along. A very powerful one. Okay, check out the list of names. Some of them we mentioned them last week. John D. Rockefeller, Paul Warburg. This was the same crowd involved in the forming of the Federal Reserve. Very interesting. Same people that created the Federal Reserve, that as we saw is a private company, is not owned by the government, is the same people that created the Council on Foreign Relations. And as we saw, the Federal Reserve issues the currency but adds interest on top. That's why the debt is going bigger and bigger and bigger. And you can refer to last week's lecture to see that, and you will see the charts from the US government and the British government about how the debt is growing and growing and growing every time, no matter what. Prominent figures who have served as CFR directors since 1921. Notice also the names. Cyrus Vance, Zbigniew Brzezinski, we mentioned him last week. We quoted him about dealing and talking about we need a new world order. George H.W. Bush, also we saw him quoting and saying we need a new world order. Henry Kissinger, also mentioning we need a new world order, attending the Bohemian Club meetings. David Rockefeller, also mentioning we need a new world order. Alan Greenspan, he was also the chairman of the Federal Reserve and also director of, as we can see here, of the CFR. Very interesting. The most powerful man in the CFR during the past 2 decades has been David Rockefeller. Interesting. We find these names everywhere. Rockefeller, especially Rockefeller and Rothschild, the 2 biggest banking families in the entire world. We're going to see now, right at the bottom, that there was a committee in America that investigated the CFR, and they found out that the CFR was promoting a globalist concept. And here we'll see many organizations, groups and foundations that gave money, donated money to the CFR. And you see there's the Rockefeller family, the Rockefeller Foundation, David Rockefeller himself, the Chemical Bank, Citibank, Morgan, Mercedes-Benz of North America, British Petroleum America, and also Arco Foundation. Very interesting one, Arco Foundation. We'll come to that next week. Okay, let's follow. The list of the CFR there is 2,670 members, And the list is like a who is who of America, including most of the nation's top leaders in government, business, education, labor, the military, the media, and banking. Look what a former member of the CFR had to say about the CFR intentions. He says, the most powerful clique in these elitist groups have one objective in common. They want to bring about the surrender of the sovereignty and the national independence of the United States. Okay, they want to surrender the United States. But to whom? Or to what? We'll see that as we go along on these lectures. You will be surprised. A second clique of international members in the CFR comprises the Wall Street international bankers and their key agents. Primarily, they want the world banking monopoly from whatever power ends up in the control of global government. Dan Smoot, a former member of the FBI headquarters staff in Washington and one of the first researchers into the CFR, summarized the organization purpose as follows. The ultimate aim of the Council on Foreign Relations is to create a one-world socialist system. So we see it here clearly. So a member of the FBI investigating the CFR, he said that they want a one-world system. Even Congressman took notice on the issues that surrounded the CFR, and that's what he had to say. Congressman John R. Rarick. He said, the Council on Foreign Relations, dedicated to one world government, financed by a number of the largest tax-exempt foundations, and yielding such power and influence over our lives in the areas of finance, business, labor, military, education, and mass communication media, should be familiar to every American concerned with good government and with preserving and defending the U.S. Constitution and our free enterprise system. Yet, the nation's right to know machinery, the news media, usually so aggressive in exposures to inform our people, remain conspicuously silent when it comes to the CFR, its members, and their activities. And I find that few university students and graduates have even heard of the Council on Foreign Relations. The CFR is the establishment, this congressman says. Not only does it have influence and power in key decision-making positions at the highest levels of government to apply pressure from above, but it also finances and uses individuals and groups to bring pressure from below, to justify the high-level decisions for converting the United States from a sovereign constitutional republic into a servile member state of a one-world dictatorship. We follow reading. On 17th February 1950, CFR member James Warburg, testifying before the Senate Foreign Relations Committee, stated, "We shall have world government whether or not you like it, by conquest or consent." Basically, he was saying, we're gonna get a world government, we're gonna get a new world order whether you like it or not. On another occasion, in the April 1974 issue of the CFR Journal, Foreign Affairs, in page 558, Richard Gardner stated that the new world order will have to be built from the bottom up rather than from the top down. That's a very interesting quote, because many people out there, when they speak about the new world order, they think the new world order is going to be something imposed by the elite or the hierarchy, whatever they want to call it, when really it's going to be the opposite. It's going to be lay people in the street, not people in politics, that are gonna start asking or even begging for a better future, for a better system, for a better economic system, for a better political system. The people will demand a solution, and then people will think that they are in control of their own destiny, when really the new world order is being applied from above, creating a situation so people demand a change, and people will think they are in control of this. And let's follow. And in study number 7, a CFR position paper published on 25th November 1959, the CFR stated that its purpose was to advocate the building of a new international order. So here we see it again. They want to build a new international order, a new world order. This is one of the reasons why just very few people has heard about the Council on Foreign Relations. We read at the bottom of the first paragraph. And that any disclosure, publication, or other action by a member in contravention thereof may be regarded by the Board of Directors in its sole discretion as ground for termination or suspension of membership. Page 182 of the CFR's 1990 annual report further states that it would not be in compliance, point number 1, to publish a speaker's statement in attributed form in a newspaper, to repeat it on television or radio, or on a speaker's platform, or in a classroom, or to go beyond a memo of limited circulation by distributing the attributed statement in a company or government agency newsletter. A meeting participant is forbidden knowingly to transmit the attributed statement to a newspaper reporter or other such person who is likely to publish it in a public medium. The essence of the rule is simple enough. Participants in council meetings should not pass along an attributed statement in circumstances where there is substantial risk that it will promptly be widely circulated or published. So they want to keep these meetings and these talks they do to promote a new world order very, very secret. Okay, now let's talk about another group. It's the Club Bilderberg. The Queen of England is the head of this club. The public name for the group was derived from the Bilderberg Hotel in Oosterbeek, Holland, the site of the association's first meeting in 1954. Also, we find the same names again, founded by a number of major One World institutions, including the Rockefeller and Ford Foundations. The express purpose of the Bilderberg Group was to regionalize Europe, to unite Europe. Here we see one of the founders, Agnelli. He said, "European integration is our goal, and where the politicians have failed, we industrialists hope to succeed." George McGee, the former US ambassador to West Germany, revealed that the Treaty of Rome, which brought the common market into being, was nurtured at the Bilderberg meetings. And that happened. Europe was united through an economic community 31st of December 1992. And we see that the Bilderberg Group started meeting in 1954. Let's follow. This philosophy of the Bilderbergs was clearly explained by the group's first chairman, Prince Bernhard of the Netherlands, whose family is a principal owner of the Royal Dutch Shell Oil Company. He wrote, "Here comes our greatest difficulty, for the governments of the free nations are elected by the people, and if they do something the people don't like, they are thrown out. It is difficult to re-educate," notice the wording, "the people who have been brought up on nationalism, to the idea of relinquishing part of their sovereignty to a supranational body. This is a tragedy." So basically saying, it's a shame that people don't have a global concept. People are very nationalist. They are very proud of their countries. That's the tragedy. We should get rid of this, and we're gonna carry on. You're gonna see how they're doing this. Prominent American Bilderbergs have included David and Nelson Rockefeller. Again, we find the same names, Rockefeller. Also Henry Kissinger, Zbigniew Brzezinski, Robert McNamara, who was the former president of the World Bank. Wow. Virtually every one of the American Bilderbergers is a current or former member of the CFR, the group we saw earlier on, Council on Foreign Relations. Helmut Schmidt of West Germany, he belonged to the Bilderberg group, which is the man we saw last week we saw a picture of him doing a lecture at the Bohemian Club, standing by the lake. And here we see Baron Edmund de, sorry, the screen didn't capture the surname, is Baron Edmund de Rothschild. So always these names appear everywhere. Rothschild, Rockefeller. Now we're gonna look at the Club of Rome. The Club of Rome claims to be an informal organization of less than 100 people who are, in their own words, scientists, educators, economists, humanists, industrialists, and national international civil servants. Very interesting that many of these positions are those mentioned by John Fitzgerald Kennedy when he talks about a monolithic conspiracy that involves scientists, education, economy, industry, the army, the armament, military, he says. Okay, let's carry on. At the bottom we read, the organization claims to have the solutions for world peace and prosperity. However, these solutions always seem to promote the concept of world government at the expense of national sovereignty. So do you see what we mentioned earlier on? Countries, they need to disappear a little bit, or the nationalistic feeling, that pride some people feel for their own countries, that needs to disappear, because everything has to be geared and shifted towards a world vision. We see that the Club of Rome raised considerable public attention with its report Limits to Growth. The research had full support of the club, and the final publication, Mankind at a Turning Point, was accepted as the official second report to the Club of Rome in 1974. Remember this date, 1974, Mankind at a Turning Point. Very interesting. We're going to come to that in a minute. In 1993, the club published the first Global Revolution, and notice what they say. According to this book, divided nations require common enemies to unite them, either a real one or else one invented for this purpose. Obviously, if the whole world needs to be united in one common purpose, we need common enemies. So here you get terrorism is a common enemy. Terrorism is a threat all across the world. The economic crisis is global, is a threat around the world. Climate change is global, is a threat around the world. And all these things are being pushed to create a new world order, and people don't know it. That's a slide, it's in Spanish, I'll translate it for you. It's saying, for similar paths is the Club of Rome, born in April 1968, created by Aurelio Peicci. He was a very prominent member of the Bilderberg Group. What a coincidence. He belonged to the Bilderberg Group and he creates this Club of Rome. He also was a CEO for Fiat, the car company, and he was at the administration board for the Chase Manhattan Bank, which is one of the banks owned by David Rockefeller. Very interesting, very interesting. His successor in the Club of Rome was Alexander King. And notice what Alexander King said. Global society requires one direction, just only one direction. A great captain that will guide the earth towards a common destiny. So they are talking about the world being united under one captain, under one leader who is going to guide the earth. Who is this leader going to be? Relevant members that belong to the Club of Rome Jimmy Carter, who also belongs to the Trilateral Commission and the CFR, and also he had been a US president, and Kurt Rothschild, a member of the Rothschild family, of course, another Rothschild name appearing in another organization promoting New World Order. And right at the bottom you have a list of very prominent Spanish politicians who also belong to this Club of Rome. And now we're going to see a couple of quotes by the books I mentioned earlier on. On 17th September 1973, the club released a document entitled Regionalized and Adaptive Model of the Global World System, prepared by the Club of Rome members Mihailo Merasevic and Edward Pestel. That's a very interesting point. We'll come to that at the end of this lecture. The document reveals that the club has divided the world into 10 political economic regions, which it refers to as kingdoms. Aurelio Peccei is the club's founder. He said, "The world model, based on new developments of the multi-level hierarchical systems theory, divides the world into 10 interdependent and mutually interacting regions of political, economic, or environmental coherence." In 1974, Merasevic and Pestel released a book intended for public consumption, entitled Mankind at a Turning Point. On pages 161-164, the authors display the same 10 regions, only this time the word kingdoms has been omitted. And now you're going to see the map they designed. And notice that was in 1974 when they released this book, Mankind at a Turning Point, and was a year before, in 1973, when they released a document that showed the world divided into 10 regions, which they called kingdoms. But now recently it's been changed back to regions. They don't use the word kingdoms anymore. That's the map. Notice number 2, that was released in 1973, and you already see the European Union there, number 2, which is something that did not come into existence until we've seen 31st of December 1992. Also number 1, interesting to see, that's the region composed by, the area composed by United States, Canada and Alaska. Well, Alaska is a state for the United States, which they share the Nasdaq. Very interesting. Also number 7, notice number 7, that's the area where I think was 4 years ago, maybe 3-4 years ago, I can't remember very well, we had the Arab Spring, when suddenly Arabs in these Islamic countries started to riot and fight against their own leadership, against their own leaders and politicians. And you could see it on the news how the so-called Arab Spring started spreading from one country to another and occupied all the region that we see here as number 7. Very interesting. In pages 151 and 152 of Mankind at a Turning Point, Aurelio Peccei, talking about man's communion with nature and the transcendent, referring to the collective field of intelligence of the human race, uses the term noosphere, which is a term that a few years ago did not appear in a dictionary. You couldn't find it in a dictionary. This term was coined by French Jesuit. We find a Jesuit again. The founder of the Illuminati was also a Jesuit, Adam Weishaupt. So let's carry on. By French Jesuit Pierre Teilhard de Chardin, whose writings have a deep impact on the New Age movement. We'll talk on these lectures about the New Age movement. The executive of the Club of Rome concludes, "We believe that an unexpectedly large number of men and women of all ages and conditions will readily respond to the challenge and will be eager to discuss not if, but how we can create this new future." And that's something you see in the news today, especially where I come from in Spain. People are fed up with the government, with corruption. and the economic crisis, and people are in the streets. There's been some riots, people talking that we need a new system, we need something better, something different, we need a solution to fix this. As the quote we mentioned earlier on by that member of the CFR, saying that the new world order is going to be built from bottom up rather than from top to bottom, that's what we see here again. Let's carry on. The Club of Rome plans to support such activity in many ways, and since intellectual enlightenment is without effect if it is not also political, the Club of Rome also will encourage the creation of a world forum where statesmen, policymakers and scientists can discuss the dangers and hopes for the future global system without the constraints of formal intergovernmental negotiation. The solution of this crisis can be developed only in a global context with full and explicit recognition of the emerging world system and on a long-term basis. Remember last week we showed Henry Kissinger saying to a journalist, no, we are going to see the beginning of a new world system emerging. This would necessitate, among other changes, a new world economic order, something we saw the Pope asking for that, and a global resources allocation system. A world consciousness must be developed through which every individual realizes his role as a member of the world community. It must become part of the consciousness of every individual that the basic unit of human cooperation and hence survival is moving from the national to the global level. Meanwhile, in the European Union website, and that's their website, that's official, notice that says European Union in the world. And how many regions do you count? Starting from North America, finishing with Australia and Pacific, you have 10 regions. Very interesting. Now let's talk about another group called the Trilateral Commission. As you can see, they have this logo, which some people say each arrow, when you separate it, you get 3 sixes. And knowing the philosophy behind some of the people owning these organizations, it wouldn't surprise me. Here you find the same logo at the cathedral floor in London. It's called a triskele. Basically it's the Celtic yin and yang. It's a Celtic version of the yin and yang. Here on this other Gothic tower in Brittany, you find the same symbol right in the middle of the tower. I'm gonna zoom the image now, you can see better. Here, it's another triskele. And what does it stand for? Let's see. The triskelion is Greek for 3 legs. It's a symbol of the sun and a modification of the swastika. So it's a sun symbol, sun worship, the Celtic version of the yin-yang symbol of life. Because sun is the one that represents birth, is the one that brings life. That's why sun worship became also a symbol of life and of fecundation and male, female procreation, fertility rights, basically. Let's carry on. The legs represented birth, death and rebirth. Symbols of the triskele celebrate Cerridwen, Celtic goddess of transformation, who offers guidance and spiritual renewal. Cerridwen is the goddess of wisdom and witchcraft. So it's a goddess for witchcraft. By the way, the swastika also represents sun worship. That's why it's found in the foot of Buddha has swastikas, and it's a symbol of sun worship. The Trilateral Commission was created by David Rockefeller. We found this name everywhere. And again, in 1973, in order to promote world government through economic interdependence among the world regions. Basically, the idea is very simple. If you want countries to depend to depend on other countries, you have to create this economic interdependence where resources are shared from one country to another, or there is lots of exportations, importations, so you create a dependence from one country to another. So if one country is pushing towards a new world order, another country will have to follow because of their economic treaties and because the interdependence they have in between them. All 8 American representatives to the founding meeting of the Trilateral Commission were members of the Council on Foreign Relations. There is 325 members, 98 from North America, 146 from Europe, and 81 from Japan. Most of the Frenchmen who are members of the Commission belong to the Grand Orient Lodge of Freemasonry. Very interesting. And it's also interesting to note that these 3 regions, North America, Europe, and Japan, are the first 3 regions in the map on the division of kingdoms by the Club of Rome. The Trilateral Commission first director was Zbigniew Brzezinski. That man we heard also promoting and talking about a new world order, who is also part of the Bohemian Club. He's been attending Bohemian Club meetings for many years, and he's been advocating, as I just said, for a new world order. He wrote several books. In one of these books, entitled Between Two Ages, Brzezinski calls for a new international monetary system and sees with favor the writings of French Jesuit Pierre Teilhard de Chardin when talking about modern totalitarianism. Now, do you recognize this symbol? A skull and bones, and the mystic or mysterious number 322. Interesting, that's the symbol for Skull and Bones, a secret society in the University of Yale. Some people say that the number 322 stands or is taken from Genesis chapter 3 verse 22, that it says, God says, after mankind rebels against God, God says, now man has become like one of us, knowing good and evil. That's where they hold their secret meetings. It's got a really charming name. It's called the Tomb. You can see there is no windows. There is no way you can see what's inside. Here are the one of the years, because every year there is 15 students that are initiated into the Skull and Bone Secret Society. And do you recognize one of the men in this picture? You will see now, he's George Bush. George Bush is a member of Skull and Bones, and I'll prove it to you right now. When the election for the US presidency was in 2004, I believe, both John Kerry and George Bush were opposition. One was the candidate, for the Republican Party, and the other one was the candidate for the Democrat Party. And John Kerry was asked about Skull and Bones, because he's a member of Skull and Bones, and he was asked about Skull and Bones, what it is, blah blah, and he said, not much, because it's a secret. And that was recorded in a newspaper, the Washington Post. And George W. Bush, in his biography, he writes, in my senior year, I joined Skull and Bones, a secret society so secret I can't say anything more. And even in the same book, he explained that he was sleeping. Someone knocked on the door in his room. He opened the door and he saw his dad. And his dad said to him, be a man and do what you have to do. Join Skull and Bones. So George Bush also is a bonesman, as they are known. That's a Spanish newspaper. That's a prominent Spanish newspaper. is one of the most sold Spanish newspaper in Spain, and the title says "The Secret That Unites Bush and Kerry," and above we read, "Both candidates to the US presidency belong since their youth to the same secret order to the same university sect," and you can see the date, 5th of March 2004. Also, as we mentioned earlier on, the Washington Post, they had an article stating that George Bush and Kerry both belong to the Skull and Bones. Interesting. Both belong to the same secret society with the same philosophies, the same core values, but they are both debating and, let's say, fighting to become US president of the United States of America. And now we're going to see a short clip about Skull and Bones. Just take notice of what is said and shown.
The Skull and Bones Society is founded in 1832 by 15 seniors at Yale University in New Haven, Connecticut. They establish a secret society with rules and rituals that remain unchanged to this day. The Skull and Bones initiation ceremony is said to be held in April in the tomb's basement. One distinguished member serves as master of ceremonies. Once enrobed, he is known as Uncle Toby. The shortest senior is appointed Little Devil and dons a satanic costume. A bonesman with a deep voice is dressed as Don Quixote. Another is dressed as the college's founder, Elihu Yale. Still another is given papal vestments. It would all be funny if it weren't for the fact that among the former bonesmen are 3 presidents: William Howard Taft, George Bush, George W. Bush.
So here we've seen that they have to dress in a very strange costumes. There is one dressed as a pope, was a papal figure. They bow down to him. And let's see more prominent people who belonged to Skull and Bones in the past. Henry Luce. He was a magazine magnate even today. Luce, not a magnet, a magnate. Luce launched multiple publications: Time, Time Life, Fortune, Sports Illustrated. So he was a really important editor on his day, and still today. As we've seen, George H.W. Bush was a Skull and Bones. John F. Kerry. And that's he's a man by name of Anthony Sutton who wrote many books, and he wrote one book talking about Skull and Bones that cost him dearly, cost him his life. And we read that he was a British and American economist, historian, writer. He studied at universities of London, Göttingen and California. He obtained his doctorate at the University of Southampton, and he was a professor at the California State University, professor in economics. And he also was a research fellow at Stanford University Hoover Institution from 1968 to 1973. And I'll show some. It's a really long, thick book, but it's highly documented. If you're interested about these secret societies, Skull and Bones, I recommend his book. It's highly documented, and for the sake of time, I didn't have time to put all the things he says about this organization and all the links they have with different other groups and what they do with the money, where the money goes. Really good book. He says, those on the inside know it as the Order. Others have known it for more than 150 years as the Chapter 322 of a German secret society. Very interesting. A German secret society, which must be the Illuminati, because the Illuminati was created in Germany. More formally, for legal purposes, the Order was incorporated as the Russell Trust in 1856. It was also once known as the Brotherhood of Death. That's what the Skull and Bones stand for. Even today, when you see some products and you see the Skull and Bones, you know it means that it can cause death, because the Skull and Bones is a symbol of the god Jupiter, which is the god of the death, which also was a symbol of the god Osiris, which is the god of the death. That's where we get this idea from. So you can see this secret society is about the god of death. Those who make light of it or want to make fun of it call it Skull and Bones, or just plain bones. The American chapter of this German order was founded in 1833 at Yale University by General William Huntington Russell and Alphonso Taft, who in 1876 became Secretary of War in the Grant administration. Alphonso Taft was the father of William Howard Taft, the only to be both President and Chief Justice of the United States. And members in the order throughout 150 years reached positions in law, education, government, media and industry. And here you can see some of the most prominent Bones families. You have Aldrich, who was the grandfather of the Rockefeller. You have Bush, Cheney, Dodge, the manufacturer of cars, Gates, Goodyear, Harriman, Kellogg, Luce, as we saw, Rockefeller, Taft. So very, very important families. The order has either set up or penetrated just about every significant research, policy and opinion-making organization in the United States, in addition to the church, business, law, government and politics. So it's a very, very important secret order in North America. The evolution of American society is not, and has not been for a century, a voluntary development reflecting individual opinion. On the contrary, the broad direction has been created artificially and stimulated by the order. The order gets the ball rolling in new organizations. It puts in the first president or chairman and the ideas, and then when operations are rolling along, often just fades out of the picture. The first chairman of the American Society for the Judicial Settlement of International Disputes was member William Howard Taft. The society was the forerunner of the League to Enforce the Peace, which developed into the League of Nations concept and ultimately into the United Nations. Wow, that's a statement. The first chairman of the American Society who was a member of Skull and Bones was behind the development of the League of Nations, which we saw earlier on the logo, which has an occult meaning, which eventually developed into the United Nations. That's the whole goal of a new world order, to unite the nations. In the United Nations we find, for example, Archibald MacLeish, who was the brains behind the constitution of the UNESCO organization. Basically, UNESCO organization is the education organization within the UN to promote education around the world, and its founder was Skull and Bones. Now let's change topic, let's change subject. We're just gonna add another piece in this puzzle that we are building called New World Order. We're going to be talking about the Very Chip. It's an implantable personal verification system. Many years ago, everything started by chipping pets, dogs and cats, especially cats. And I remember that was in the mid-90s. I was maybe 16, 17 years old when the chips started being promoted for pets, and I used to say to my friends, that chip is gonna end up put in us. And they used to laugh at me. They used to say, come on. In those days, conspiracy theories weren't known as they are today. Or even the sentence conspiracy theory didn't even exist. They used to say to me, oh, you're crazy. Or they would laugh, or they would say, you've seen too many movies. And I used to say to them, no, just you will see in the future that's going to be implanted in people. Here, I'm not going to read everything. If you want, you can stop the DVD or the lecture at home and you can read it by yourself. That's something fine in online news, where they promote a chip as a health benefit, like the Obamacare is doing now in North America, where chip is being promoted, and they're talking about even chipping children from birth. So basically here is for diabetes or for people that has problems with glucogel, insulin. They explain that there is chips you can put inside your body and they will help to fight or cure this disease. So sometimes it's promoted as a health benefit. That's CBS News taking a picture of the first family in North America that got chipped. I think they were known as the Chipson rather than the Simpson. ABC News, implant chip, track people. We read, when you arrive to pick up your child, settling the hospital bill with your health insurance policy will be a simple matter of waving your own chip, the one embedded in your hand. So here, there is people already saying, with this chip, you're gonna be it's not just gonna be for health benefit. You're gonna be able to pay things for it with it. That's very interesting. We'll expand on this one. BBC News, Barcelona clubbers get chipped. Here they show BBC science producer Simon Morton goes clubbing in Barcelona with a microchip implanted in his arm to pay for drinks. And you can see in the picture, there is a nurse implanting the chip in his arm. What is very interesting about this place, the owner of this club, that's a club where I come from, the city of Barcelona, his name was, I don't know if he's still the owner or not, I'm not sure. His name was Conrad Chase. He was from North America. He went to Big Brother in Spain. He didn't win Big Brother, but he arrived to the final. He became one of the finalists, and that made him very popular. Even though he didn't win, he became very popular. And then he started promoting his own nightclub and the very cheap. And then I discovered that he was the representant for very cheap in Spain. And his name is Conrad Chase. So I tried to contact him, and days later I received an email from the Chase Manhattan Bank in New York. And that surprised me a little bit. I've never received an email from a bank, unless if it's the bank that deals with my finance. And I tried to contact Conrad Chase. His surname is Chase. He's the rep for Very Cheap in Spain. He went to Big Brother and became very popular because got to the final. I tried to contact him and I get an email back from the Chase Manhattan Bank, which is owned by David Rockefeller. I found it very, very suspicious. A very, very strange coincidence, I would say. Here, more news, BBC News. Chips to fight kidnapping. Because obviously some people are saying, oh, this chip is going to be a tracking device. You know, we can put it in our children, and then if our children get kidnapped, we're going to find them. Or if they get lost, we're going to find them, because it's going to be a GPS implanted in their skin, in their bodies. Security under the skin. A US company has been given the green light to implant microchips in humans. It's intended to provide medical information, what we said earlier on, is promoted as a health benefit. But will it turn into a surveillance system? So is people already raising questions? And we're going to see the answers in a minute. Who else is promoting the idea of chip? Masonic Lodge in Ontario, Canada. They have a program called CHIP. It's not about chipping children. They're not putting chips on children yet. But they are promoting a program using modern techniques and technology to identify every single children, so that if they get lost or kidnapped, they can be found through a database, I believe it is, but it's not an implanted chip. But I believe they are already working on preparing the minds, because the program is called CHIP, Child Identification Program. And here in Missouri too, we see that Freemasonry also is promoting the same program, CHIP, Missouri Child Identification Program, aiding in the identification and recovery of missing children. So everything is promoted as something good. It's going to be something good for society, for your kids. If you lose them, you just track the chip and you find them. That's what the chip looks like. You can see at the bottom right picture is really small. Here you can see an actual, that's a real picture of a chip implanted in a hand. That's what it looks like through X-ray. That's the components for the chip. You can read that if you want. I'm not gonna go into all these details. You can read that by yourselves if you want to pause the DVD, the video. And now Mondex. What's Mondex got to do with all this? We'll see it in a minute. Motorola is the company producing the microchip for Mondex smart card. That's where Mondex comes. They developed several implants for humans using the biochip. Transponder is a system of storage for reading information in microchips. Reading occurs in waves like a remote control. The biochip excuse me, the biochip measures 7 millimeters of length and 0.75 millimeters wide, as large as a grain of rice, so it's tiny really. It contains a transponder and a rechargeable lithium battery. The battery is recharged by a thermocouple circuit that produces an electrical current with the fluctuation of body temperature. Of course, this is an electronic device, small, but it's an electronic device. If you put it inside your body, you're not gonna be walking around with a wire sticking out of your hand or your arm. So every time your chip beeps because it's running low on battery, you have to go and plug yourself to a wall. So it's a very clever system. They use body temperature to recharge the battery of this chip. Very interesting point. Here we see Mondex. Mondex has dealings with over 250 corporations in over 20 countries, and they use the Mondex system, which is promoting a cashless society. That's why their cards, many cards nowadays have a chip, and you have cards that you don't have to put them through the slot and you just wipe them across, add your PIN number, and that's it. So look how many countries have dealings or negotiations or business with Mondex. Great Britain here, Canada, the US, Australia, New Zealand, Israel, Hong Kong, China, Indonesia, Macau, Malaysia, Philippines, Singapore, Thailand, India, Taiwan, Sri Lanka, many more in Central America, Salvador and Brazil. So it's a very big company. Okay, Mondex International. What does Mondex stand for? What does Mondex mean? Let's look at the Webster's Dictionary Encyclopedia. Mon means monetary. Dex comes from the Latin word dexter, which means belonging to or located on right hand. That's what Mondex means. That's some news. PR Week. Mondex set for a global review. There was a man by name Shanwick, who was the PR account for Mondex International, and then they contracted another man by name of Robin O'Kelly, and look what he said. Talking about Mondex, this is the final stage in becoming a global reality. With MasterCard's backing, there is nothing to stop Mondex remember? Money, right hand. Now from becoming the global standard. So it's going to be a global system. Okay, we've said the chip works with body temperature to recharge the battery. So here you see areas of the body where the fluctuation of body temperature is more easy to pick up, and obviously this chip is gonna go somewhere where these fluctuations of temperature occur, so the chip can be recharged. Out of all these areas in the body, which one do you think would be the easier and more comfortable to have the chip implanted? Yes, of course, yes. I thought the same. Obviously, the forehead is not going to be in your mouth, it's not going to be in your anus. You're not going to be paying things while someone swipes a machine across your bum. Not in your mouth. Under the armpit, very uncomfortable. The ear. And the one I think, and as I can see, and as you say, I think is the one you also would take, is one on the forehead. Would be probably the easiest one. And I remember being a kid, my mom, if I had some temperature, first thing she would do would be touch my forehead and my hands also. The hands easily become hot or cold. And now we're going to show you a short clip from Spanish news, would be the equivalent to BBC Two. It's in Spanish, but I added the subtitles. So read and listen carefully to what they say.
Las llaves, las tarjetas de crédito y hasta el carnet de identidad están cada vez más cerca de la extinción. En Suecia y Dinamarca ya están probando microchips que se llevan implantados en la mano y nos va a permitir abrir puertas o pagar la compra con solo acercar nuestro brazo.
Durante años hemos creído que el implante de microchips solo sucedía en el cine de ciencia ficción. Hoy hay noticias que cada vez nos acercan más a la trama de esas películas. En Suecia, una empresa dedicada a nuevas soluciones tecnológicas ya ha comenzado a implantar microchips a sus empleados. Tan solo acercando la mano se abren puertas, se puede interactuar con móviles u operar con los equipos informáticos. El chip mide unos 12 milímetros, como un grano de arroz, y funciona por radiofrecuencia.
Felt pretty scary, but at the same time it felt very modern, very 2015.
El chip también se puede utilizar para pagar la comida en la cantina y reemplazar las contraseñas de los ordenadores de acceso. Dicen que hace la vida más fácil a sus trabajadores.
You have your own identification code and you're sending that to something else which you have to grant access to. So there's no one else that can sort of follow you on your ID, so to say. It's you who decide who gets access to that ID.
También en Dinamarca las llaves, las tarjetas de crédito y de identificación podrían desaparecer, porque un laboratorio estadounidense ha comenzado a probar y distribuir los microchips que se implantan bajo la piel para diversas tareas.
Jeg vil gerne have det på mig. Man kan få den til at låse sin telefon op, eller sin hoveddør, eller sin bil, eller til at starte sit stereoanlæg, eller hvad man nu måtte have lyst til.
Advierten que los gobiernos y las empresas algún día exigirán a las personas a que lleven implantado un microchip similar.
Gerne vil kunne tale kinesisk, og du ikke har tid til at lære det, ja, så kan du så måske få sådan en chip.
Según los ingenieros e investigadores, es solo cuestión de tiempo que acabemos llevando estos implantes identificadores por radiofrecuencia.
So here we've seen they say that governments will require people to have a chip, and that it's a matter of time before everybody carries one of these chips, and that a few years ago is something we only saw in the movies. And probably some of you, if you have an age maybe like mine, 30 something, you will remember movies in the 1980s, 90s, where things like this were seen. people swiping the hand, people swiping an eye, and doors opened, or they buy for things, because those movies were done for a reason. And we'll come to that when we deal with Hollywood and the entertainment industry. Now I'm going to show you a couple of slides. This one, that's from the book of Revelation, is the last book in the Bible, written by John 2000 years ago. Basically, the word Revelation, the name of the book in Greek, the New Testament was written in Greek, means apocalypse. And as soon as you say apocalypse, people think about zombies, nuclear explosions, the end of the world, disasters. But apocalypse really means revelation. That's what it means, revelation. And then we read, see if it sounds familiar to you with what we've seen today. The 10 horns which you saw are 10 kings who have received no kingdom as yet, but they receive authority for 1 hour as kings with the beast. These are of one mind, so they are united, they have one purpose, and they will give the power and authority to the beast. And now another text. He was granted power to give breath to the image of the beast. He refers to a beast, so here is talking about 2 beasts. So he, the first beast, was granted power to give breath to the image of the beast, that the image of the beast should both speak and cause as many as would not worship the image of the beast to be killed. He causes all, and notice this now, both small and great, rich and poor, free and slave, to receive a mark on their right hand or on their foreheads, and that no one may buy or sell except one who has the mark or the name of the beast or the number of his name. Here is wisdom. Let him who has understanding calculate the number of the beast, for it is the number of a man. His number is 666. Very interesting that these last 2 quotes is something we've seen in movies, talking about a beast, 666, because many things have been told to mislead people which are not true. And we're going to show you in these lectures what is the beast, who is the beast, is this something that someone wrote 2000 years ago because he was just crazy and made this up, or is there something behind, and that's why Hollywood is always, and the entertainment industry like heavy metal, rock music, even comedies, TV, sitcoms, draw from this imagery, the beast, 666. We'll come to that as the lectures go along. Thank you very much for coming and listening, and we'll see you again on the next lecture next week. Please don't miss next week's lecture. It's going to be a very interesting one. We're going to be talking about the weather. So thank you for coming. I'll see you again. Goodbye.